The crystal chandelier cast fractured rainbows across the mahogany dining table, each shard of light trembling like my voice as I spoke the words that would shatter our family's carefully constructed world. "His name is Daniel," I said, my hands folded in my lap to hide their shaking. "Daniel Martinez, and I love him." The silence that followed was so profound, I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, each second stretching like an eternity. My father's fork remained suspended midway to his mouth, a piece of prime rib dangling forgotten. My mother's porcelain teacup rattled against its saucer as she set it down with trembling fingers. "What did you just say?" Father's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of thunder. At 25, I had lived my entire life within the gilded confines of our Park Avenue penthouse, moving through charity galas and country club soirees like a chess piece on my parents' board. They had plans for me: marriage to the Harrison heir, a position on the museum board, a life that would maintain our family's pristine reputation. But Daniel had shown me something different, something real. We had met 6 months earlier at a community center in Queens, where I was photographing underprivileged children for what I thought was just another charitable obligation. Daniel was there as a volunteer, teaching art to kids who came from neighborhoods where dreams were luxuries few could afford. While I snapped pictures through my expensive lens, he was on the floor, his sleeves rolled up, showing a 7-year-old how to blend watercolors to create the sunset she had never seen from her apartment window. "He's a teacher," I continued, my voice growing stronger despite the storm brewing in my father's eyes. "He teaches art at the community center, and he's the most genuine person I've ever met." "A teacher?" Mother's voice dripped with the same disdain she reserved for discussing the help. "At a community center?" She pronounced each word like it tasted bitter. "Yes, Mother. He believes in making a difference. Where is he from?" Father's question cut through my defense like a blade. The truth stuck in my throat. Daniel lived in a modest apartment above his grandmother's bakery, helped support his younger sister through nursing school, and sent money to his parents who had immigrated from El Salvador with nothing but hope and calloused hands. His world was measured not in stock portfolios, but in small acts of kindness, not in social connections, but in genuine human bonds. "Queens," I whispered. Father's fist struck the table with such force that the china jumped. "Queens. A teacher from Queens. Have you lost your mind, Catherine?" The interrogation that followed was merciless. Where did he go to school? Brooklyn Community College. What did his parents do? His father was a janitor, his mother cleaned houses. How much money did he make? Barely enough to survive. Each answer I gave seemed to deepen their horror, as if I was describing not the man I loved, but some social disease I had contracted. The boy I had met in the rain outside the community center, who had offered me his umbrella and walked home soaked to the skin just to keep me dry, was being reduced to a list of inadequacies by the 2 people who were supposed to love me. "This ends now," Father declared, his face flushed with rage. "I forbid you from seeing this person again." "You can't forbid me. I'm 25 years old. I can and I will. You live under my roof. You drive cars I purchased. You wear clothes I paid for. Every comfort you've ever known comes from me, and I will not watch you throw it all away for some gold digger from the gutter." "He's not a gold digger." The words exploded from me. "He doesn't even know about our money. I've never told him." Because you know exactly what this is, Mother interjected, her voice cold as winter. A tough infatuation with someone unsuitable. This is what happens when we allow you too much freedom. But as I sat there, watching my parents dissect Daniel's worth like vultures picking at carrion, I realized that my love for him wasn't diminishing under their assault. It was crystallizing. In their world of appearances and expectations, I had found something real, something that made my heart race not with anxiety, but with joy. The dinner ended with an ultimatum. Choose Daniel and lose my family forever, or end the relationship and reclaim my place as their dutiful daughter. As I lay in my childhood bedroom that night, surrounded by awards and accolades from a life I had never truly chosen, I understood that the real battle wasn't with my parents. It was with myself. The war began in earnest the next morning when Father made his first strategic strike. Daniel called me at noon, his voice tight with confusion and hurt. "Catherine, I don't understand. They fired me. The community center board said they had to make cuts, but Mrs. Rodriguez in accounting told me someone called and threatened to withdraw funding if they kept me on." My blood turned to ice. I knew without asking who had made that call. "Where are you now?" "Looking for work. I've got applications at 3 schools, but..." His voice trailed off, and I could hear the fear he was trying to hide. "I'll figure something out. I always do." That afternoon, I confronted my father in his study, where he sat behind his massive desk like a general commanding his troops. "You had him fired. He didn't even look up from his papers." "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Daniel, you had him fired from the community center." Father finally raised his eyes, and I saw no trace of remorse there. "If someone loses their job for being unsuitable, that's hardly my fault." "How could you? He hasn't done anything wrong. His only crime is loving me." "His crime," Father said, standing slowly, "is thinking he deserves you. It's delusion, Catherine, and I won't allow it to continue." The next few weeks became a siege. Everywhere Daniel applied for work, the answer was the same. "Sorry, the position has been filled. We'll keep your resume on file. Don't call us." My father's network of influence spread like poisonous roots through the city's educational system, choking off opportunities before Daniel could even find them. But Father's campaign extended beyond professional sabotage. At the country club, I overheard Mrs. Whitmore gossiping about poor Catherine Aldrich and her unfortunate infatuation with the help. At charity events, friends who had known me since childhood began treating me like a curiosity, their smiles brittle with barely contained pity. "Darling, you must know this can't last," my childhood friend Amanda said over lunch at the plaza. "I mean, what would you possibly have in common with someone like that?" The answer was everything that mattered. While she discussed her latest shopping trip to Milan, I thought of evenings spent with Daniel in his tiny apartment, talking about books and dreams until dawn painted the sky pink. While she complained about the difficulty of choosing between her various suitors, I remembered the way Daniel looked at me, not as a prize to be won or a status symbol to be displayed, but as someone worth knowing completely. The real test came when Mother arranged an accidental encounter with Jonathan Harrison III at a museum gala. Jonathan was everything my parents had ever wanted for me: handsome, wealthy, well-connected, and utterly predictable. He was also kind in his own way, which made everything worse. "I heard you've been going through a difficult time," he said as we stood before a Monet, the water lilies shimmering under the gallery lights. "I want you to know I understand. Sometimes we all need to explore before we appreciate what we have." His proposal came 3 days later. Not a passionate declaration, but a business arrangement dressed in romantic language. My parents were ecstatic. The engagement announcement was already written, the venue booked, the guest list compiled. All I had to do was say yes to a life of comfortable numbness. Instead, I found myself on Daniel's doorstep at midnight, rain soaking through my evening gown, my carefully styled hair plastered to my skull. He opened the door and simply held out his arms. "I can't do it," I sobbed against his chest. "I can't pretend to be someone I'm not anymore." "Then don't," he whispered into my hair. "We'll figure it out together." But even as he held me, I could feel his body trembling. The past month had aged him, carved lines of worry around his eyes, stooped his shoulders with the weight of unemployment and uncertainty. He was fighting a war he couldn't win, against opponents he couldn't even see, and it was destroying him. "Maybe they're right," I whispered. "Maybe I'm being selfish. You could have a good life with someone who doesn't come with all this baggage." Daniel pulled back to look at me, his hands cupping my face with infinite gentleness. Don't you dare let them make you believe that love is selfish. What's selfish is asking you to be less than who you are just to make them comfortable." The final confrontation came 2 weeks later, when Father appeared at Daniel's apartment building, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits who looked like they crushed dreams for a living. I was there, having coffee with Daniel's grandmother, learning to make the empanadas that were her specialty. Through the window, I watched my father climb the steps like an avenging angel, his face set in lines of cold determination. "He's here," I whispered. Daniel nodded, having expected this moment since the day we met. "Stay upstairs." "No, if we're going to face this, we face it together." The confrontation in that modest living room, surrounded by family photos and well-worn furniture, was brutal in its precision. Father offered Daniel money, a substantial sum, to disappear from my life. When Daniel refused, he made threats. Unemployment, deportation of Daniel's family, social ostracism. "You're destroying her," Father said, his voice cutting through Daniel's protests. "She's giving up everything for someone who will never be able to give her what she deserves." "And what does she deserve?" Daniel asked quietly. "A life where she's never allowed to choose for herself? Where her worth is measured by her usefulness to your reputation?" Father turned to me then, his eyes filled with something that might have been genuine pain. "Catherine, please, come home. All of this can be forgotten. You can still have the life we planned for you." Standing there, I realized that this moment would define not just my future, but who I was at my core. I could return to safety, to comfort, to a life where every decision was made for me. Or I could step into the unknown with the only person who had ever seen me as I truly was. I took Daniel's hand. "I'm already home, Father." The door closing behind my father that day was the sound of one life ending and another beginning. Within a week, I was cut off from everything I had ever known. My credit cards were canceled, my trust fund frozen, my belongings packed and left on the curb like unwanted furniture. But exile, I discovered, could be its own kind of freedom. Daniel and I moved into a tiny studio apartment in Queens, our entire worldly possessions fitting into 2 suitcases and 3 boxes. I sold my jewelry, the pearls my grandmother had given me, the diamond earrings from my sweet 16, the watch Father had bought for my college graduation, to pay for rent and groceries while Daniel searched for work. Those first months were harder than anything I had ever experienced. I learned to cook on a hot plate, to wash clothes in a laundromat, to stretch a dollar until it screamed. My hands, once soft and manicured, grew rough from working double shifts at a photography studio downtown. But every evening, when Daniel came home from his new job teaching night classes at the community college 3 boroughs away, when we sat together on our second-hand couch sharing a dinner of rice and beans, I felt more alive than I ever had in my parents' mansion. The real test came not from poverty, but from the gradual realization that we were building something extraordinary from nothing. Daniel's night classes grew into a full program. My photography work, born from necessity, began attracting attention from galleries that appreciated its raw honesty over polished pretension. We married on a Tuesday morning at City Hall, with Daniel's grandmother as our only witness. She cried through the entire ceremony. Tears of joy, she insisted, though I suspected she was also mourning the lavish wedding that would never be. I wore a simple white dress bought from a thrift shop and carried wildflowers Daniel had picked from a vacant lot. It was perfect. 3 years later, I opened my own gallery, specializing in social documentary photography. The opening night was attended by artists, community leaders, and activists, people who cared more about the stories being told than the price of admission. As I watched Daniel move through the crowd, discussing art with the same passion he brought to everything he loved, I felt a fierce pride that had nothing to do with social status and everything to do with the man he was. The letter came on a Tuesday, delivered by courier to the gallery. My mother's elegant handwriting on cream-colored paper, an invitation to lunch, nothing more. No apology, no explanation, just a time and place. I almost didn't go. When I arrived at the restaurant, not one of their usual haunts, but a modest bistro in Midtown, I found Mother sitting alone at a corner table, looking smaller somehow than I remembered. Her hair had gone gray at the temples, her hands showed the first signs of age spots, and when she looked up at me, her eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion. "You look well," she said quietly. I was well. My life had purpose, meaning, joy. I was building something that mattered with someone who loved me, not for what I could provide, but for who I was becoming. "I am." She nodded, and for a moment we sat in silence, 20 years of shared history stretching between us like a chasm. "Your father had a heart attack," she said finally, 3 months ago. "He's recovering, but it changed him, made him think about things differently." I waited. "He's been reading about your gallery, about the work you do with underprivileged children, the scholarship program you started. We didn't know." The lunch lasted 2 hours. Mother told me about Father's slow recovery, about long nights when he questioned every decision he had made, about quiet conversations where your name came up again and again. She told me about attending my gallery's latest exhibition anonymously, standing in the back corner, watching as Daniel explained my photographs to a group of teenagers from the same community center where we had met. "He was so proud," she whispered, "so proud of the work you're doing, of the life you've built, and so ashamed of his part in nearly destroying it." The reconciliation didn't happen overnight. It began with tentative phone calls, awkward dinners, gradual meetings where Daniel and I slowly proved that our love wasn't the disaster my parents had predicted, but the foundation for something beautiful. Father's first real conversation with Daniel happened 6 months later, when they discovered a shared passion for baseball and spent an entire afternoon arguing about statistics and strategy. I watched from the kitchen as my husband patiently explained the finer points of batting averages to the man who had once tried to destroy him, and I saw something shift in my father's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or the dawning awareness that worth couldn't be measured in bank statements. The true healing came when Father offered Daniel a position managing the community outreach program for the Family Foundation, not as charity, but as acknowledgement of Daniel's expertise and passion. Daniel accepted not because he needed the job, but because he recognized the gesture for what it was, an apology written in the language of opportunity. 5 years after that confrontation in the modest living room, we gathered again, this time in the same Park Avenue penthouse where our story began, but the atmosphere was transformed. Daniel's grandmother sat beside my mother, teaching her to knit. Father and Daniel collaborated on plans for a new arts program. The table was set with the same china, but the conversation flowed with genuine warmth instead of brittle politeness. As I watched my family, the one I was born into and the one I had chosen, blend together like watercolors on wet paper, I understood that the true victory wasn't in proving them wrong about Daniel. It was in helping them discover that love, real love, doesn't diminish anyone involved. It transforms everyone it touches, creating something more beautiful than any of us could have imagined alone. Standing at the window that night, Daniel's arms around me as we watched the city lights twinkle below, I thought about the girl I had been, scared, confined, living someone else's dreams. She seemed like a stranger now, that girl who had measured her worth by others' expectations. The woman I had become was harder-edged, but softer-hearted, scarred, but stronger, free in ways that had nothing to do with rebellion and everything to do with choice. I had learned that true love wasn't the fairy tale ending, but the willingness to begin again, every day with courage and hope. In the end, we hadn't just overcome the barriers that kept us apart. We had used them as building blocks for something stronger, something that could weather any storm, because it was founded not on convenience or convention, but on the unshakable belief that everyone deserves to choose their own story. And ours, I knew, was just beginning.